I'd like to share with you some thoughts and insights on the office of Histor. The Histor is the collegiate officer that's responsible for working with our alumni. I divide his responsibilities into two different roles. One is more of a secretarial position, that of maintaining contact information for the alumni. In order to communicate with the alumni, we need to know how to reach them. In today's environment, email seems to be the most direct and personal approach. But we also need to know a physical address. Where are these alumni? Are they an hour away from the chapter? Or are they across the country and more like a day's journey away from the chapter? So having this contact information is very important. I think it's also very good to have secondary means of communication. So if an email is bad, well, what can we do? Is there a phone number? Is there a Facebook contact? Is there a LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram? Whatever technology may be developed, what is another secondary means of communicating with our alumni? So the Histor, one of his responsibilities is to collect this information from the alumni. In addition, he needs to periodically verify that this information is still good, communicating with the alumni at large to know who you've lost contact with, who we no longer have a means of communicating with. So that's that secretarial part. The secondary is to actually communicate with the alumni. The alumni want to know what's happening with the chapter, but they also want to know what's happening with their fellow alumni. Now, depending upon the age of your chapter, your alumni could be as young as 20 to 25. And if you've been around longer, you may have individuals that are in their 80s or 90s or perhaps even longer. So these individuals, their knowledge, their experience, and their idea of the fraternity may be a little bit different. So your communication of what you communicate and how you communicate with these individuals needs to also be different and diverse. The alumni care mostly about the individuals that they were in the chapter with, the people that they joined the fraternity as pledge brothers, the individuals that they lived with perhaps or graduated with. But there is in generations that bleed over. If you think about it from a chapter standpoint, an undergraduate standpoint, the freshmen will know the seniors and the seniors may know the freshmen. But then once they move on and begin their other lives and professional careers, they will lose contact with those younger people. But they will still remember individuals that were freshmen when they were seniors, or the individuals that are seniors when they were freshmen or first-year students. So if you think about it, an individual may have about 6 to 8 years of contacts within the fraternity. In addition to that, there'll be individuals that they've met along the way, people who came back to a homecoming or people who served in volunteer capacities for the fraternities. So how these individuals know one another and how they connect with one another is important to understand. As we communicate, we perhaps need to divide it up into generations. Those individuals that were in the chapter in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and etc. There may be a time that you need to divide the chapter up into different scenarios. Maybe a century, maybe 10 years is too big, or maybe it's too small. That's where you've got to customize it. An example of way to divide the entire chapter up in a random manner is perhaps to use scroll numbers, the odd numbers versus the even numbers. Another suggestion is dividing these individuals up based upon perhaps hundreds. So those who are with the 100 scroll numbers, or the 200 or the 300. If you need a secondary way of matching people up, then perhaps what you could do is you could look at individuals who are what I like to call your century brothers. So my scroll number 135, I would be paired up with someone whose scroll number is 35, 235, 335, 435. And of course, it depends upon the age of the individual and also the age of the chapter. But this is just another way of communicating and dividing these things up. To me, as a good rule of thumb, you need to have a proper portion of the communications that you communicate to the alumni. You don't want everything chapter focused. You don't want everything alumni focused. You want a nice, even spread of different content, different things. I'm an individual I'm a visual learner, so I like seeing pictures. I would rather have one picture with a paragraph than one page and no paragraph. So consider your alumni. Consider the different means in which they communicate with one another. Also understand the message that you need to do. So to kind of recap, basically, a Histor's responsibility is that of a secretarial or a information keeper, and 2 is the communication of alumni. Enlist help. You are not the individual that has to do it all. Consider having your board of advisors, your chapter advisors help communicate to those individuals. If you've got someone who's not in that position, perhaps served in that position for a number of years, they could be a very valuable asset, as they may have experience that crosses decades, particularly if they served in a position for a long period of time. In addition to that, we need to find new ways of communicating with people. There are a lot of alumni that are getting together over the video with Facebook groups or LinkedIn chats. But again, we just need to be creative in how we communicate and what we communicate with our alumni. As always, if you have any questions, I'm available for contact, as well as the other professional and volunteer staff of the fraternity. Thank you, and be persistent. Communication with our alumni is very important.